Welcome to the Future of Supply Chain, presented by Dynamo. Each episode, we sit down with leaders in the industry as we build the future of supply chain together. Let's get into the show. Here's our host, Santosh Sankar.
Hey, ladies and gents, welcome back to the Future of Supply Chain podcast. I'm your host, Santosh Sankar. Joining me today is Lisa Smith, co-founder and managing director at Prewave. Welcome, Lisa.
Yeah, hello. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
It's great to reconnect. And I'd mentioned to you kind of in our pre-recording, I went back in our CRM, and the last time we spoke was about 4 years ago. You had just closed or were about to close your pre-seed, and it's been awesome to see how much you've achieved since then. But we're going to get into a lot of that here in a few minutes. I'd love just to kind of open up with giving our audience here an overview of what Prewave is and what you and the team are building.
Yes, sure. So it's exciting to talk again. I think, 4 years back, we were a smaller company, let's say. I think we must have been under 10 people, let's say. Now we are around 200. So it's been quite a journey. And what we do as Prewave is we are a supply chain intelligence platform, and we help our clients, enterprise clients, to better understand risk in their supply chains. So that means we help them to reduce disruption in their supply chains, to increase the sustainability and the transparency in their supply chains. We work with big enterprise clients like, for example, in the automotive industry, Volkswagen or Ferrari, or in the food industry, companies like Dr. Oetker, for example, or airlines like Lufthansa. So it's a broad span of industries we serve.
Awesome. And, what's the Lisa Smith story? How did you get into the world of supply chain risk intelligence?
Yeah, I get this question quite often. Like, why? Why are you doing this? So I did my PhD in computer science at the Technical University in Vienna. And at the beginning of my PhD, I was exposed to this interesting topic of supply chain management. Yeah, so I worked on a research project in that domain. And this is when I really learned how complex global supply chains are, but also how important they are to basically our life on Earth, let's say. And I also understood that there are many problems also happening in supply chains. So on the one side, really financial damage is happening that is caused by supply chain disruptions. So really supply chains breaking, products not being able to be delivered to the next part in the supply chain. But then also on the sustainability side, a lot of risks are happening, human rights violations, environmental violations. And I learned that there is very little transparency on the one hand on how do supply chains actually look like beyond the first year. But then on the other hand side, also what is really happening in this complex network in real time. There was very little knowledge about this. And this is now about 12 years ago when I started my PhD, 2012. On the other side, I was working on natural language processing projects. Yeah. So where we were working with algorithms already back then. Yeah. I think it wasn't even called AI back then. We got machine learning algorithms where we process text data. Yeah. So basically new technologies applied to new data sources like news media data or social media data. And this is where I understood that we can use these new technologies and data sources to better understand what is going on all around the world. So things like a fire in a factory suddenly would show up in social media data when people are actually taking pictures, reporting that. So for my PhD, I decided to connect these two topics. Can we use natural language processing technologies, but also social media data, news media data to better understand supply chain risk? And that was, let's say, the origin of the core idea behind Prewave. Yeah? And I worked on this for about 5 years. I led research projects both in Asia and in Europe on that topic. And the end result was a technical prototype that could turn text data into supply chain risk signals in different languages. So that was the starting point. And then 2017, I teamed up with my co-founder, Harold. He has his background in enterprise software sales. So he was working already with many clients that we nowadays serve, but he understood the science of selling into big corporations, something that was completely new to me. So we teamed up. I think that was a very good combination. And then it still took us a couple of years to really find product market fit. So from 2017 to 2021, we were really working on turning this technical prototype into a market-ready product. Sure. But this was not really straightforward. It was like a lot of trial and error and pilot projects in different industries. From 2021 onwards, we started to grow rapidly. This is basically when also the market developed very favorable for this whole topic of supply chain intelligence.
And when we say supply chain risk intelligence, what does that practically mean? What are the words or processes that should be kind of going off in our audience's minds when they hear this term?
Yeah, so this is really a new category that is developing, that is sitting next to procurement systems typically. And it's about providing the best risk data at any given point to many different processes. And these can be procurement processes, but this can be also risk management processes themselves, where it's about really proactively trying to understand where in the supply chain do I have elevated risks and what can I do to mitigate that proactively. But then also on the reactive side, if something's happening, I need to be very quick to respond. And this is basically supply chain intelligence is really providing you the best data in order to enable you to do this at a high excellence level.
And so I'm going to kind of pull that thread here, and I'd love to kind of give our audience a bit of supply chain risk management 101. And our audience, as you might know, kind of encompass corporate executives, middle management, investment, and even other founders. So you have a variety of, I would say, kind of experts or expert levels. And so my first question is kind of what are the key elements around supply chain and what supply chain groups must account for when they're developing a risk management framework or trying to even understand, hey, these are the basic things happening within our supply chain through the lens of risk?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to understand is that there are many different use cases by different user groups around this topic of supply chain risks. So several of them you mentioned already, but so it could be a disruption use case. Yeah, so I want to minimize disruptions in my supply chain, but it could be also a sustainability or ESG use case. Yeah, saying like I want to minimize reputational risk because I don't want to be in the news tomorrow. Yeah, it might be also a compliance topic. So let's say bottom line is it can come from different parts of the organization. In the end, it makes sense to develop a holistic risk management system that is all in one platform. But you can start at several different points, and this is often how we work with clients. We start in one department, and then we basically expand it to other departments. And the elements that you would need is typically this combination of proactive and reactive strategies. So proactive means really getting a view on how does your supply chain actually look like. In reality, most companies only know the first tier of their supply chain and maybe some parts when they work together with one supplier of how does this network look like beyond. And that's when we work with our clients to map out their supply chains. And that is something that can be AI enabled. Yeah? You can initialize this supply chain network based on publicly available data that's coming from different sources. And you can basically show these are your tier 2, tier 3 suppliers and initialize this network. And then you can also run automated risk analysis, both in the tier 1, but also in this deeper supply chain network. And this is something that we would call as a proactive strategy. It's like understanding where are my riskiest suppliers. And here, our approach is to do this mostly automated. Yeah. So let's say big automotive companies would have 50,000 suppliers, right? Once you start sending out, for example, questionnaires back and forth, so things like that, it just takes you a long time and it's very static. And so we are applying our technology basically to automatically score suppliers and answer that question, like what are my most risky suppliers, and then you can define a strategy on how do you want to engage with them. You can get data from them directly, you can get data from other third-party data sources to basically complement it to get a picture, and then define mitigation strategies for those in order to bring down the risk proactively. And then the other side would be the reactive part. Yeah. So this is really, okay, I know now how my first tier looks like, how maybe my tier N looks like, but where should I act? What, like, if maybe today in the morning there was a fire explosion and I should very quickly react in order to make sure that I get some of the alternative stock, for example, or define some other mitigation measures. So I make sure that this incident that already happened will not impact my supply chain too much. And this is basically where monitoring, real-time monitoring, where AI again can help to basically monitor tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of nodes and make sure that the right information basically reaches the right user in the organization and starts an incident workflow.
Is there an optimal place to begin with this exercise that tends to lead to success more frequently than not? Or is it more so kind of stepping back in your own words and just thinking about hey, like you need to figure out what you're trying to mitigate or address, and you work from that. So in your example, it was reduce disruptions. But I'd be curious, kind of as somebody in the corporate audience who has not necessarily done this or is looking to put in a robust system, where should they begin?
Yeah, so generally there is no wrong way. You can begin in any of those departments, but what we see happening frequently is that it starts actually with compliance or sustainability nowadays in the last 3 years. And the reason for this is that there are more and more regulations being published all around the world that are targeting enterprise supply chains. Yeah. So basically, the first step for an enterprise could be now I have to do it. Yeah. So like maybe you have on the roadmap already for a long time. I need to do this at some point. It's clear. We all went through the Corona pandemic. Everyone knows supply chain is important, but this is now really giving a deadline to it. Yeah. So for example, in Europe, the European Supply Chain Act will come into effect in 2027, basically affecting all large enterprises and require them to have a proactive risk management approach in place. So that means companies right now are basically starting to basically get into this, evaluating systems, and that can be a starting point. Yeah, but I think what is important is that you always already think about, okay, what are steps 2 and steps 3? Yeah, it should not be only a compliance exercise, basically, at ticking the box for regulators, but it should be more than that, because supply chain risk intelligence can unlock a lot of more business value. So you can basically, by minimizing disruptions, basically save, prevent a lot of damages, and obviously increase sustainability in the supply chain that leads to also a better reputation or less reputational risk, let's say. So there's, of course, a lot more business value. You can start anywhere, but oftentimes right now it's starting in the compliance department, which is also perfectly fine.
And, transparency is oftentimes discussed when you think about supply chain risk. How do you think about transparency? Because to us at Dynamo, that's just one piece of the overall risk puzzle when we think through supply chains.
Exactly. It's one piece. So what I would understand under transparency is knowing how your supply chain actually looks like, particularly beyond tier 1. So I think this is something that is becoming more and more, let's say, normal for an enterprise to actually know that. Yeah. But I mean, years ago, it was not possible, also technically not possible. And it's something that is now possible. So there's also a responsibility, to now know basically how your supply chain actually looks like. So that's one part. But then the other part is also really knowing where are the most risky suppliers. So where do I really need? So it's not enough to say, I have my supply chain, but I would really need to know where should I act. Yeah, I mean, both for there's just a responsibility to do so, but on the other hand, also to increase the efficiency. I don't need to engage with 50,000 suppliers in the same way. There is no reason to do so. But if you have this transparency on what are the more risky suppliers and the less risky suppliers in different dimensions. For example, one can be more risky in disruption, but less risky in a sustainability point of view. And it's really important to get that knowledge so you can then basically control your actions accordingly, making sure that you really have very efficient and effective mitigation measures in place to overall improve your supply chain.
And we've run into organizations who see the importance of risk management tooling, but they struggle to close the gap and realize ROI. So you mentioned one could be proactive or reactive, and this might fall perhaps more in the reactive bucket, where they have a set of capabilities. It's stating, hey, there's been a fire at your tier end supplier. But then we see these teams turn around and say, we pay for this enablement, but what we now are struggling with is how we close the loop, right? So like, what do we do next? Because finding another supplier for this particular part could be challenging. Even if you find some suppliers, how do you then put them through the procurement process to make sure quality, minimum order quantities, all that stuff are appropriate and suitable for what we need and aspire to? What have you seen kind of your best customers do in order to actually realize the value?
Yeah. So one important aspect here is the timing. Yes, it's like to be able to react fast. So one thing is to know what to do, but the other thing is also to be quickly. And so we see that many customers have already the processes in place, or knowing that, for example, if the supplier fails, there is a second source, or there's a potential alternative if it's a part that is easily replaceable, of course. But in these cases, for example, but then it's really about knowing it very fast. Yeah. So this is one aspect to it. And this is where AI obviously can help, just to make sure that you are not overwhelmed by alerts, but really get the ones where you really need to react to it. So that's, I think, one piece to it. The other part is, okay, what should I actually do? Yeah, that's obviously not so easy to answer always. That's where, for example, with Prewave also have actions in the system that basically suggest a workflow on what you can do when a specific incident happens. Yeah, but to be honest, there's only also so much you can do when the incident is there. Then it's really about firefighting, and oftentimes there is not a standard process to be followed, but you need to be creative and really look at the situation. But then a task team can be formed at the enterprise once they know, basically to tackle that, and get into touch with this supplier and other suppliers very quickly. So the timing, I think, is the biggest factor, that you just have enough time to define these often very individual solutions. But the proactive part is actually more important, because this is where you have more options. So let's say, for example, there is a certain supplier that is very important in your supply chain, because if that supplier fails for a particular amount of time, there is a certain revenue that is at risk. So if that supply doesn't deliver, that's connected to so and so many end products that you want to ship, and that's worth a specific amount of money that can be calculated, right? So, but once you know that for each of your suppliers, you can also think, okay, what can I do basically to bring this time to react down? Let's say, for example, like you could have a second source, or a second warehouse. If there is a supplier that is has maybe a high earthquake risk, then you could establish a second warehouse that can be even cost effective sometimes, and really take out millions of damage potential in case this supplier fails. So this is like then really the proactive side, where you can very clearly calculate the ROI, and where you have a lot more alternatives. So I think most of it should be actually tackled in this proactive strategy, and then there will be some residual risk and things that are happening that are unforeseeable, and then it's about being as quickly as possible.
And you had mentioned kind of regulation and sustainability are two of the forcing functions that are requiring companies to have more robust processes and technologies here. How have you seen that evolve? Because we have seen, if we step back, right, there's increased geopolitical tension. There's a meaningful sense of nationalism across many developing economies. So we're seeing greater regulation. In order to prove that you're within the parameters of the regulator, we're seeing a lot of companies step up compliance efforts, rethink trade management, customs, but equally then sustainability also plays a role in this. So I'd be curious, kind of from your lens, what have you seen over the last, call it 5 to 6 years, right? Because you actually have a unique vantage point as to before this trend and now as we're living through this trend. Is there anything interesting you picked up? Are there accelerants in certain regions? Are there certain topics that are coming more frequently than others? I'd be curious.
Yes, so we see supply chain due diligence regulation popping up anywhere in the world. But primarily here in Europe, I mean, I think most of the regulations are being basically published right now, but we see it also in the US, like the Uyghur Forced Labor Protection Act, for example, but there's a number of others. But so we see it as a sort of mega trend that started at the consumers or the citizens basically not accepting anymore that, for example, child labor or forced labor or environmental harm is being done in the products that we use every day. So that was the starting point. And then it's basically the policymakers following, saying, okay, we cannot basically tolerate the situation where the companies that are very proactive on that do actually have a competitive disadvantage, right? So that's why they're setting rules all over Europe, but also in the US, to say, okay, we just establish a new standard. So everybody has to operate at that new standard. And we think we're just at more or less at the peak of this development here in Europe after the European Green Deal. Basically, there are a lot of regulations that are basically affecting the supply chains of European companies, for example, in different aspects. So it's sustainability reporting, but it's sustainability due diligence to really also risk assess your suppliers. It's also the EU deforestation regulation. So there are the EU forced labor regulation, for example. So there are many different regulations now coming to effect at the same time. And so generally at Prewave, we think this is a good development because in the end, it's the goal is basically to get supply chains free of human rights violations and environmental violations. But at the same time, we think it's very important that we do this basically ensure that compliance is done in an efficient manner, and ideally at the same time leads also to more resilient supply chains. So because it shouldn't be an extra burden, then it's also not good for the economy, but it should basically, now we should take this chance on more regulation, let's say, also more transparency being required in supply chains to improve supply chains overall, to improve digitalization, automation, transparency overall. So we just have more stable and more sustainable supply chains in the end globally.
So I'm going to walk forward here, and I'd be curious, right? You have a roster of who's who of customers. What have they found makes Prewave so unique relative to existing practices they might have adopted, alternative solutions from other vendors? What really makes Prewave stick out in the mind of a buyer?
Yeah, so I think there's primarily 2 points to it. So one is the automation part, so the strong AI enablement. So we have worked on this now since 12 years, let's say, on the NLP in the core that basically enables us to run risk analysis in a very automated way. So the previous way would have been, for example, sending out questionnaire or spreadsheets to many different suppliers. And whenever you do anything with more than 10,000 suppliers, it's going to take you a year or longer, right? And then you only get the information back that is proactively reported. You can only do this maybe once every 2 or 3 years. So it's just not the ideal way, right? So now you can automate a lot of this. And this is because we can work with external data sources. We can work with governmental data to get this initial risk analysis in order to understand, okay, from these 50,000 suppliers, maybe those are the 500 that I should really take a look at and really work with. And this is this big efficiency gain. Yeah. So efficiency by automating because it's AI enabled. So this is this one part that customers appreciate about Prewave versus previous solutions that were very manual. And the other part is the holistic end-to-end risk management. So on the one hand side, we can cover different use cases from different departments. As mentioned in the beginning, this whole topic of supply chain risk management typically touches many different departments, from disruption, ESG, compliance, even the finance department, and in the future probably many others as well. And it makes sense to have all of the risk data in one place, and to connect also all sources to this one platform. And we have built Prewave from the beginning with this multi-use case perspective. Yeah, so it's not only an ESG tool or only a compliance tool or only a resilience tool, but it can do all of this, and we can continue to basically build more use cases on top of this platform. So that's the second part. And this is when, for example, like an enterprise would look for a compliance solution. They can already see then, okay, but how can I then get this to disruption management? How can I get this maybe to also commodity monitoring? So there's many other things that we can do on the platform. And this is when we can give a whole vision on how can this go from a must-have into a business value unlocking solution. And that's basically where we take our customers on a journey. And we can also basically, because we went this journey already with many customers, we can help them to establish best practices around that. And that's, I would say, the 2 main points that our customers like about Prewave.
Amazing. And, as we were prepping for this episode, Sophia kind of picked up that in one of your prior interviews, you actually made a really interesting comment about how you need to view, or one needs to view, compliance less as a check the box activity and more about a vehicle for overall resilience. And I would love for you to elaborate on this, because I think there's a lot of wisdom, and you've touched on some of these things kind of previously just now, but I'd really want to kind of dig in deeper, because I do believe that, especially in a post-pandemic world, a lot of people are looking back at those boring and arduous compliance exercises they were forced to do and realizing that if you do them really well, you actually can over time build a stronger supply chain. And you, of anybody in the world, probably sitting at the center of that.
Exactly. So that's also our thinking. So we don't want so as I said, it shouldn't be like an extra burden for companies to now be compliant to regulations that kind of establish a standard that we all want, right? So and also if we think into the future, it's 10 years from now, yeah. So we cannot really imagine that companies will continue sending each other tons of questionnaires when and they have to build up workforces to fill that in, and it's all inefficient and so on. So yeah, so generally there is a need now basically to be more efficient in the basically to tackle this current compliance wave, yeah, this to be compliant to all of this, yeah. But then you have already set up a lot of foundation that you anyway need for any holistic risk management system, yeah. So that means then the step of from monitoring human rights violations and environmental violations to also basically monitor operational problems, fires, accidents, border crossings, and so on, is just like an incremental step. It's not a completely new thing that you need to do. And basically what we are working towards is that we take our customers on a journey. Yes, you need to do this right now. You might see this now as a burden, but let's do it in a smart way such that you can overall, in a couple of years from now, have your complete risk management digitalized. You have automated workflows. You have good transparency, and that will lead to ultimately a much more stable supply chain and to will establish again a new standard. Let's say it's almost hard to imagine that in 10 years from now, a company will not have something like that. Yeah. So, and that's what we find very exciting about this new category of supply chain intelligence. It's really working towards a new standard of information that makes supply chains ultimately better on all of these fields: compliance, sustainability, and resilience.
Awesome. And the most recent news is that you've closed your Series B, led by our friends at Head of Sophia. What should we be getting excited by or excited for over the next, call it 18, 24 months? What's in store at Prewave?
So it's very exciting. So we just closed more than 60 million Series B round. That was a big step for us. And what's on the roadmap? We will invest most of this in product development and research. So we are an AI centered company, and we will continue to work on that front. And I think it's super exciting what's all happening on the AI front as well. So I feel we are really in this epicenter. So sustainability is now at let's say there's this trend, and obviously supply chain resilience after the corona pandemic has this trend, and then you have the AI part that is also at a peak that we have never seen before. So that's super exciting, and so we will continue to invest a lot in this AI, basically in our AI technology. That's one part. We will also invest into international expansion. So we are now basically based in Europe, and we just made that step in the last years, or from let's say the German-speaking region into covering all of Europe. And the next step will be to get our boots on the ground in the US. So that's certainly something that we will see in the next 24 months as well.
Amazing. And so with that, I'm going to wrap us up here, and our audience is familiar with kind of the rapid fire that we usually finish up with. So these are 3 topics, and you have, call it 10, 15 seconds just to share kind of what's top of mind in each of these. And given geopolitics is such an important piece of the risk puzzle, I'd be curious, first topic, the upcoming elections in the US.
Yeah, so we're watching it here from Europe. It's always exciting times when there are elections in the US. It's oftentimes very close. It's interesting also in the months before. So we'll keep watching. Obviously, it's interesting for us as Prewave also how will trade politics develop. Looking at regulations, for example, like the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act and things like that. How will these things? How will regulation around supply chain develop in the US? So these are things that are top of mind. But we will keep watching over the next months. Very. Yeah, excitedly.
The rise of AI.
Yeah, super exciting. I feel like it couldn't be more exciting as an AI startup to be an AI startup right now. And so, I mean, that's what I want to say. It's just great. As I told you, I worked on this for 12 years, and for 12 years ago, we had completely different possibilities. And now, more or less, in a matter of weeks, we get models, and we can fine-tune models. We can do things that we would have not thought that are possible before. So it's a very exciting times to be an AI startup.
And last but not least, your favorite Olympic sport from this past summer?
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I haven't watched any of those, but the only thing I picked up was that Austria, so our home country, so to say, has won one medal, and that's in judo. So that's the one I would name.
I'll take it. With that, Lisa, thanks so much for sharing kind of the Prewave story, where you all are at, more clearly defining kind of this concept around supply chain risk intelligence. And I speak on behalf of our listeners. We look forward to seeing everything that you have in store, and also welcome you here to the US when that expansion begins.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It was nice catching up again.
Thanks for watching. Follow us at dynamo.vc for all the latest episodes. We'll see you next time.